Ladies and gentlemen, are we live yet? Yes, we are, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and all the ships at sea. How is everybody doing on this really nice Friday, August 21st, 2026? And of course, we hope everybody's doing well. And I know if I'm glad it's Friday, then everybody's glad it's Friday. So I'm glad you chose to hang with me for an hour or so and listen to and actually, I what I would really like is to mention that the call lines are open because I just remembered to open them and to give us a call at 949-629-3820. And let's see if you got a thought you want to share, an opinion, or maybe you just want to vent. We are your guys. I mean, we are I've vying for Democrats. If you want to whine and complain, we'd rather not have that because this is a time of political unity, which is, how I'd kind of like to start today. And I'm going to kind of start, I'm going to hit a few common themes just really quickly, like within a minute or two. And the first thing I want to hit is I think the president, and by extension, I think the Republicans have, oh, I don't know, I think you could call it like a credibility problem. Of course, the country has a $40 trillion deficit problem, but it doesn't seem to bother these guys. And the funny thing is, the people that give Trump the credit for being the financial genius that he is do not believe that he's responsible for like 25% of that in 6 years. I mean, guys, if you ordinarily would listen to your accountant, I think if you had an accountant go over Trump's books, I mean, why do you think he had, the short Jewish guy that went to Rikers prison for him? I forgot the names. I mean, yeah, why do you think he had an accountant like that? I mean, I guarantee he just didn't know how to keep two sets of books. He's probably able to juggle, like like an old encyclopedia edition. I mean, the guy had to have been really good you know, to go to prison for his boss. But anyway, so the Republicans have a credibility problem. We have a huge deficit problem. And on a related note, I know I've been hitting this treasury bond stuff a bit more than usual lately, but that's because we're going broke like really quickly. Like this is really Trump's big beautiful bill and his kind addition to the deficit of $3.8 trillion. Uh, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, the camel was kind of limping along, and in good times he'd maybe make a dent. Bad times he might get a little high, but we were chugging right along. And Chuckles comes along, and next thing you know, we've got everything. And what you have really is the end result is the looting of the United States government in every way, shape, form possible. Oh, and the enriching of himself, of course, as the president. I mean, can you imagine people just there? If somebody just want to bring a bag of cash to the White House, you think he'd be stopped? I think he might want to get an escort. Uh, but yeah, that's where we are. And as a kind of a corollary to all that, it's time for unity. I mean, no matter what, if it has Democrat after the name, I don't care if it's Democrat, Socialist. I mean, I care, but I don't care if it's a Democrat, Socialist, Democrat, Communist, Democrat, Warmonger. Well, that might be a little iffy. But whatever it says, if there's a D by the name, we got to vote for them. Hook, line, and sinker, swallow it all, in for a penny, in for a pound. And, oh, so that's, a quick thought on unity. However, if we do stick together and do this, there's no doubt that we'll have sufficient votes to win the election. Whether that those votes are treated fairly and honestly is kind of up for debate, isn't it? Or you would have to assume that at this point it's a foregone conclusion that something's going on. And what I'd like to know is exactly when did Americans turn into a bunch of cheaters and liars and thieves? I know they've always been, every society has that. But there was this, it's kind of like Hitler. Trump could be a once in a history figure who has taken the government and just looted it and left it behind. Didn't he didn't care? There's nobody after him. What does he care? And I said, you don't make a massive ballroom and all those kind of renovations to the place you're living if you plan on leaving anytime soon. Most people might touch up a little something because they know the next guy's going to be there in 4 or 8 years. But Trump just seems to assume ownership of everything and everybody. And how you guys let him get away with it, I will never know. The guy has zero morals. He's, I mean, convicted felon. And let me be completely honest with you. What what was the deal? How did you get by January 6th? Ordinarily, that would be like enough to permanently disqualify anybody from even thinking about the office of president. But guess what? There are enough. I call it what I don't know what to call it at this point, but enough people voted for him in the right states, and he won convincingly. At least as far as the swing states goes, and it's still shocking to me. And I think that what's going on in D.C. and by extension worldwide is happening so quickly at a time when everybody is so involved in running their own lives that the news or the current events kind of get by you. And this is just you cannot become numb to the corruption. And to a degree, we already are. I mean, now nobody is surprised at any kind of thievery that goes on. Now, keep in mind, these are the guys that were going intercontinental ballistic over the suggestion that Hunter Biden spoke business on Air Force Two. They were livid. But this is like, oh, okay, never mind. And you're like, guys, you're the sheriff. You're supposed to be the sheriff. How about a little law and order and dignity, not just nothing to see here, just a little ordinary corruption. And, you know, I said, I know when the first child got elected to Congress, and I think that was Newt Gingrich back in, was that 1980 maybe? And anyway, Newt was the first one to come to D.C. with this non cooperative, highly partisan charged spiel. And of course, he's got Rush Limbaugh and God knows whoever it is backing him up on radio. And for whatever reason, and this is irked me no end, and in part led to the creation of Democracy Radio Network, is that no matter where you were, AM radio would have, I don't know, at least two, three, and these are the small places, conservative radio stations. I used to have drive cross country a lot, and I would take different routes and just spin the dial kind of. But you could always get to hear those conservative voices coming through. And I always thought that was just like grossly unfair. So I'd like for Democracy Radio Network to be the first in a series of stations where affiliates we're working with now to create a broad spectrum network to broadcast 12 hours a day. And do wish us luck. If you'd like to contribute to our success, I'd like to humbly ask you to navigate on over to democracyradionetwork.com. And when you see the PayPal donate button, I say please do what you can. I've got plans, statewide in maybe 6 to 12 months, nationwide in 12 to 24. And a little gas in the tank always helps. So with that in mind, navigate on over, hit the PayPal, you guys know it, so on and so forth. And let's get get into back to the bond thing, like I promised. And it's funny. Yesterday I had interviewed, as I said, Laura Lacko, and that's LACKO for FORMV.com. That Laura Lacko running for city council in Mission Viejo.com. And we hadn't really formalized a question or topic list And I have had bonds on my mind, ever since things have gotten like noticeably worse. And so I said, well, hey, Laura, how are you? She says, oh, good, thanks. How are you? And I said, well, like, Laura, tell me, what kind of shape are the city's muni bonds in? And she's like, couldn't you ask me anything harder? And I'm like, yeah. And the truth about it is, it was just so totally unexpected. And it kind of came out of my mouth just because I was thinking bonds, bonds, bonds. And how do our cities usually finance themselves? Bonds. Yeah, we need those guys. Uh, and we, unfortunately, we need the bond attorneys, but that's how we do things. I mean, we're just a bunch of debtors and trying to hang on until until the next paycheck arrives. So we're not that different than anybody else, no matter what they might tell you. Okay, so anyway, so what does Japan and God knows who else are selling our bonds? Okay. And keep in mind that a bond is like the ultimate safe investment. I mean, it's like, it's how can I put this? You are guaranteed a rock solid return of this interest rate for X number of years. Whether you buy, I don't know, $10,000 worth of bonds and pay either they either do it one of two ways. They either do it at an OID, an original issue discount, and instead of like if the object is 10,000, they'll float 9,500 and then do another five later. I actually get the other 500 back at the end when the last payment is made, and that's why you pay 900, 9,500 for a $10,000 bond. Is 10,000 is what you get back. Okay, so anyway, and think about this as, and it's really kind of corny, but widows and orphans kind of fund, or just how can I put this? Severely handicapped people who need to have a trust fund or who are fortunate enough to have a trust fund established. And whoever sets the trust up, the object is to provide enough income uninterrupted, for this person's life usually. And bonds that slow, steady payment, the returns aren't, stellar, but they're rock solid and guaranteed. So with something considered that stable, any sort of instability rocks the boat. And it's not like when you and I borrow money. The lender assesses our ability. I say that kind of laugh at that. Our ability to repay the loan. And guess what? If we're a pretty good bet, maybe we get a 10% interest rate. But what if our credit's a little spotty? Well, maybe 15%. So you see, it always hits the neediest the most. Uh, so anyway, these treasury bonds, Japan's selling these things. Countries are selling these things. They're saying they do not believe the United States will be able to make these payments. Okay, so they sell the bonds. And so what happens? Usually other people start selling the bonds too. And so there's a couple of things you can do. If you're a government like the US, you can step in and buy as many treasury bonds as you can that are being sold, which is just, a huge bit of self-destruction. And that might give you like a day or so, but that's not, and they do that to reassure others who haven't sold to hold the bonds. And you know how the U.S. gets screwed if people are selling our bonds. If people don't want to buy bonds, how does the seller make the buyer buy? Well, the seller says, "Well, I'll give you a higher interest rate to cover the new your doubt." And so the debtor nation keeps paying a higher and higher interest. And like I said, as of now, didn't Joe Scarborough say something about if you made $1 million a day, you'd have to work for like 109,000 years to make some debt in the deficit. Uh, so and who preaches fiscal responsibility? The people that never perform, the Republicans. So guys, let's finally get smart and no independent votes for anybody. You know, it's a we need Democrats in every position. Like I said, I still, yeah, this whole notion of unrestrained cheating and just cheating in plain sight and daring people to stop you is so offensive. It's like selling the office of the president. Well, who's going to stop me? Make me stop. He's just an incorrigible child. Uh, but the stakes are, yeah, I mean, they could be the world. Does anybody doubt a lunatic like him would launch a nuke? I mean, seriously, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. And it's always hard to predict a lunatic, but that would be pretty tempting for him to. I mean, I don't know how he would resist the temptation. I can only hope that somewhere along the line that the order gets intercepted. And what if it doesn't? What if Russia nukes London, and we get nuked on in D.C. Or what would be the most crippling blow? What if we got nuked in Silicon Valley? Huh? How about that? I mean, that's the heart and soul of our tech innovation. I mean, I'm not discounting MIT and Georgia Tech and Cal Poly and all that, but just my provincial way of thinking. Okay, so and now let's kind of compound that. Just let you know the Treasury bond selling is it's just disastrous. Uh, and I say Besant, and Besant's got a net worth of like $500 million. I don't really know what incentive he has to look out for you and me, you know. And it's not like the boss has a reputation for looking out for his employees. And this whole thing's been one big bad reality show con job. And the real question is, did America learn anything? And I'd kind of like to know. Sorry about that getting a little dry. We today for anybody that's in Southern California, yeah, Sushi Friday at Vaughn's, and they have a few sushis available for like $5 or so. So we splurged and had a little sushi and potato salad. And but there was something else that had come up, and I hope you guys remember what my thoughts were about Tom Friedman, the writer for the New York Times, and of course, we don't want that. So anyway, when Friedman writes, I mean, I pay attention. What he says is is insightful, and it's gained through exposure to people that you or I would never ever get exposed to. And today's Tom Friedman article, direct from the New York Times, is called "The New Physics of Power," and I'm going to read a bit to you here and there, and only because I can't. If I could put it in better words, I would. But if try to sit back for a second and let me read this, and we'll stop along the way and what have you. But or give me a call if you want me to dwell on a particular topic. So Tom Friedman, The New Physics of Power. If I were writing a book about the U.S. war with Iran, I know exactly what the title would be. It would be President Trump's social media post of April 5th, 2026, directed at the leaders of Iran. Quotation mark. Open the expletive straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. That's, of course, in caps with a couple of exclamation marks and in quotations. Wars are crucible that very often exposes changes in the physics of the world around us. Who has power, who doesn't have power, and how that power is being wielded. Nothing better captures the new power equation produced by this war than Trump's unhinged and obscene rant at the Iranian leadership for not bending to his bombs. This new physics of war is equally present in the conflicts between Ukraine and Russia, Hezbollah and Israel, Hamas and Israel, and the Houthis and everyone else. My summary of this new dynamic is that the small can now act really big, really accurately, and really inexpensively. How about that? Uh, and while the big can also act really small, really accurately, it's far more expensive for them to do that while bearing the burden of vast legacy arms systems. You can read Pentagon Military Industrial Complex. And let's see. Uh, the net advantage of this for the moment seems to be small. That should keep you up at night when you think how the emerging revolution in artificial intelligence will surely supercharge this trend, enabling the small to act even bigger, mightier, and less expensively. They can be able to do more with less, cheaper. Great. Uh, Thanks, Donald. It's not surprising that Trump is frustrated. After all, on March 11th, yet less than 2 weeks after he and Israel started this latest bout of war with Iran with a large scale bombing campaign, Trump declared, and of course, quotation marks again, we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. In the first hour, it was over, but we won. And he was right about exactly one thing: never say you won too early. Trump didn't realize that the Iranian government also has a say in when the war's won and lost. Imagine that. Iran may not just roll over after they've shown you they're not going to roll over. More important, and unlike Trump, Tehran had a plan B for the morning after. How's that? No plan B. Trump, I mean, he's just an idiot. uh, Use its newfound ability to act big, accurately, and cheaply to seize control of the Strait of Hormuz, even though its military is a small fraction of the size of America's. Uh, and if that weren't enough, and had been badly hammered, uh, I wish I could take delight in seeing our pompous, narcissistic, constantly bloviating president, whom Michael Cohen referred to as a Cheeto dusted something or other, orange Cheeto dusted, whatever, cartoon, whatever it was. Um, which could take delight in seeing our pompous, narcissistic, constantly bloviating president humbled by reality. But I truly do not, because this is getting scary and it's going to get worse. The Iranians have inflicted real harm on America, on the battlefield, and in our economy. The scale which Trump and Defense Secretary Pistol Pete, Pretty Boy Kegseth have been hiding. Like I said, the scale, the harm they've done, which Trump and Defense Secretary Pretty Boy Pistol Pete Kegseth have been hiding. We really, wouldn't somebody like to know what the thing's actually costing? And aren't we entitled to know? Or aren't isn't Congress entitled to know? Or are they just, in Trump's pocket too? I mean, guys, this is like bad. You got to do something about this. Anyway, Iran has been under economic sanctions off and on since 1979. Yet, it has managed to develop an arsenal of sophisticated but relatively inexpensive missiles and drones that has enabled it to fight both Israel and the U.S. to something of a draw. Can you imagine? And do some significant damage to the American military assets in the region along the way. Consider just a few stories you might not have noticed. And how about this? The reason the main U.S. aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, the Abraham Lincoln, has sometimes run low on supplies to sustain its almost 5,700 person complement uh, is after the first day of the war, Iranian missiles and attack drones destroyed much of the U.S. supply base in Bahrain. As it went up in smoke, so did a major logistics flub that the major logistics hub, that the Navy relied on for decades. The Times reported. This forced Trump and the ever more smug Hegseth to increase their reliance on a base under British command. The island of Diego Garcia as its supply hub, which is roughly 2,700 miles from Bahrain. Uh, and let's say, how is Bahrain so unprotected, huh? I mean, you don't. It's just you guys just did a lousy job. Just admit it. And while that will never happen, and truth of the matter is, keep lying to the public. We're on to you, so it doesn't matter what you do from here on out. Okay, so or maybe you missed a story in the Journal of Defense Secretary Defense. God, or maybe you missed the story in the original in the Journal of Defense Security Asia, commenting on a CNN report that sometime in the early days of March, an Iranian missile destroyed a $500 million radar vital to running a THAAD terminal, high altitude area defense, advanced missile defense system at Muwafa Salty Air Base in Jordan. Sure, there can't be that many American air bases in Jordan. The attack signaled a potentially transformative moment in the strategic contest between Iran and the U.S. and Israel. A senior Jordanian official told me he was stunned to learn that the Iranians somehow managed to send their missile at THAAD's radar system by maneuvering it in flight to make a flanking attack on the radar and evade detection and interception. This was against the most sophisticated anti-missile system in the U.S. arsenal. Yeah, doesn't that make you feel good? John Arkia, professor emeritus of the defense analysis at the UN Naval Postgraduate School, and that in Monterey, explained to me that missile warfare is no longer just a matter of firing off a warhead on a predictable trajectory and then letting inertia and GPS smart guidance lead us to its target. The Russians have focused enormous resources on building missiles with mid-flight maneuverability, guided by better real-time information, increasingly propelled at hypersonic speeds, and capable of arriving from an angle. Say, from an angle the defenders not anticipated. Iran's Fatah missiles reportedly have such capabilities, although it's not clear whether they or drones took out the THAAD system 500 miles from Iran. Cost us $500 billion. This is making the missile, as opposed to the drone, the preeminent weapon of the 21st century, with the potential to undermine deterrence and stability in many different kinds of battles, said Arkia, author of the new book, The Troubled American Way of War, From Hiroshima to the Age of Algorithms. China has been deploying maneuverable hypersonic DF-17 missiles for several years, and now in its live-fire exercises in Chinese waters near Taiwan, the water just keeps getting deeper. On March 3rd, two one-way attack drones struck the U.S. Embassy compound in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, at about 1:30 in the morning. The first drone flew straight into the floor housing the CIA station at the Riyadh Embassy. The second drone flew directly into the entry hole created by the first, causing an extensive blast and a fire that burned for hours. Later reports suggest that this Iranian attack may have been aided by Russian satellite intelligence provided by Trump's good buddy, Vladimir Putin. And Trump has seemingly done nothing, like nothing. For generations, Archaea noted, wars were won by mass and energy. Warfare followed a simple physical law. The farther you fired your projectile, the less accurate it was. So distance had to be overcome with mass and energy. Not today. Wars are won by information, says Archaea. And even the little guys now have access to it. You just have to look at how Hezbollah has inflicted significant harm on Israeli communities and the Israeli army with its huge U.S.-made military platforms, how badly Ukraine has bloodied a big bad Russia, and how Iran is fighting the United States and Israel to a stalemate to see how inexpensive precision weapons buildable in a basement workshop with components that can be found on Amazon uh, been on Amazon, have severed the old link between range and accuracy. So now you got range and accuracy. Great. Well, good for us if we're sending, but we don't want to blow people up. We just we're kind of a peaceful people. We've been through that. This is just a horrible aberration. Anyway, let me finish this up. Ukraine, Archie added, has become a sea power without a traditional navy. It has used drone boats and armed jet skis to push Russia's conventional Black Sea fleet far enough away from Ukraine's coastline so it can keep exporting its grain and fertilizer to world markets. These new technologies allow the many and the small, Iranians, Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, to slip the heavy punches of their opponents because they are well hidden and can strike back with accurate blows of their own. The U.S. military, meanwhile, has just 11 big lumbering divisions and 11 carrier groups. That's why defenders now have a real advantage over attackers. Ikea concluded, Trump and Pretty Boy Pistol Pete Kegstaff kept focusing on scaling up the war, adding more tempo and more tonnage, and the Iranians focused on scaling out the war, hiding small units with precision missiles in more places and attacking U.S. bases and Arab oil facilities all over the Gulf. Their job is to survive long enough to shoot and scoot. On land, a few big formations of Abrams tanks matter less than the many and the small with cheap weapons they can build and modify in a week. These new weapons amplify another advantage the small have over the big. They don't have to win. They just have to avoid losing. We've got to win. We've got to end the war. We've got to go home and not look back. Try doing that now. Let's see. Before here it is. This is kind of a long article, but it's Friedman. I can't do it justice. Before the Iranians and Hezbollah get too smug, though they should remember the other half of my equation. While the small can now act really big, the big can now act really small. On the first day of the war, Israeli airstrikes with precision weapons aided by U.S. intelligence killed over 40 senior Iranian leaders gathered in a high-level leadership meeting in a single compound in Tehran. In other words, with precise information, Israel wiped out much of Iran's national security elite with that one shot. And then there was an Israeli pager attack on Hezbollah. On September 17th and 18th, 2024, Israel detonated the pagers and other handheld electronic devices used by Hezbollah members, fighters, officers, medics, and civilian supporters, killing dozens of people and wounding some 3,000 others. An estimated 1,500 Hezbollah fighters were reportedly put out of action because of injuries, mostly affecting their hands, faces, and hips. Using a relatively small quantity of explosives and a huge dollop of information, Israel killed and wounded a significant number of Hezbollah fighters in just a few hours. Yeah, I mean, you got to be impressed, right? Even though that's, kind of close to a war crime with civilians, I'm not going to comment much more than that. But anyway, the U.S.-Israel Stuxnet attack on Iran's Natanz enrichment facility that began in 2009 was another version of this. And you guys remember this, instead of bombing the facility, the U.S. and Israel inserted a small computer worm, a few lines of code to disable a big number of Iran's IR-1 centrifuges, though the centrifuges were quickly replaced and the disruption was ultimately minimal. The U.S. and Israel have never acknowledged responsibility for the virus. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, know what I mean, know what I mean. That was the big acting small, using just malware. But you can bet the development of that code and that whole joint operation cost a boatload of money. What's truly alarming today is how easy it is becoming for the small to act big. And by small, I don't mean just in size, I mean in age. Get this, a teenager with a laptop, Starlink connection, and open AI model can now disrupt municipal water or power systems by identifying and exploiting old software vulnerabilities. So don't be surprised if one day soon you hear your mayor sounding like Trump. Turn my water back on, you crazy. So, guys, that wasn't now you see why I had to do that. I could never have paraphrased that to the degree he did. So anyway, let's. I hope everybody seriously takes Friedman to heart. And another thing, I have when history is written, we deserve to be, I don't know, almost or at least I'm not saying complicit, but God knows we could have done so much more to help the Ukrainians, and we should have. Um, I know you got the NATO Article 5. You don't want Russia to attack Poland or some NATO member, Turkey. And, guys, there's just no easy answer. But the only thing that's a given in this deal is that, there's just a ton of unnecessary deaths or murders, whatever you want to call them. I mean, from the kajillion people on the Russian side to, every last Ukrainian peasant fighting with their fingernails. And we've got Trump not giving them interceptor missiles. I mean, he's just. I'm going to tell you about the Franny. I tell you about the Franny Leibowitz thing. She's one of those like avant-garde kind of liberal photographers from New York. Oh, uh, lifelong New Yorker. In the same age range and stuff as Trump. And somebody asked her about Trump, and she said something like, "The scary thing is how really stupid he is." She says, "You don't know anybody as stupid as Donald Trump." Then she said, "Trust me, you don't." And I'm like, "Geez." And you always know the guy was a lunatic, but this is a stupid lunatic on top of that's even worse. It's not like guy has the ability to look at the source of information. If it makes him feel good, it's all that matters. Oh, like whose famous last words? "Oh, be easy peasy, lemon squeezy." And what's the Don the Con saying? "Sounds good to me." And next thing I know, it's like I could have a watch here, but I don't. Uh, but it's a little late for that now. And what do you say? And in the New York Times today, we all know that warfare is message and content related. I guess propaganda might be a particular term you might want to become familiar with. Uh, but in the Times on the inside, page 2, there was a picture of a mass funeral in Gaza. I mean, there must have been 50 caskets. I can't imagine how many people. And you know, it's hard not to react to a mass funeral. It just is. Trust me. Take a look. Uh, and then you had some kids at a kind of a Gaza school trying to pay attention. They had another picture of a bunch of Palestinian men watching the World Cup. God knows how and where. And then you had a picture of another family crawling through the rubble where they used to live. And Israel's losing this huge public relations battle, and I mean, to be honest with you, they're on the wrong side of this. I mean, they caused this, and I mean, there was no, after October 7th, I do think that all gloves were off. Uh, but at the end of the day, no matter who's right and who's wrong, somebody's going to come pick up the pieces and rebuild society. And if there was an Arab Gandhi who would who could get the Hamas and Palestinians to actively disarm and have I guess kind of a capitalistic society, that there's no doubt in my mind that Israel would help them plant the seeds of a decent flourishing economy, because usually when people make money, they live in peace. And I don't think that's and what's happening now is the small minority of lunatic Israeli settlers. And I've seen these guys in like New York and stuff, and they believe their conviction just as thoroughly as a Trump believer believes in Trump. These guys honestly believe that none other than God Almighty Himself gave with the covenant of Israel, that God gave Jews Israel from the land to the sea, whatever it was. And just because Palestinians have it doesn't really count for anything. That just means we have to take it from them. Why? Because it's ours. How to give it to yours? Well, God gave it to us. Okay, we can see this is going to be difficult. Uh, so anyway, in the face of a difficult Middle Eastern situation, you would ordinarily think that you might want to chat with a Middle Eastern specialist or two, just in passing. But somehow or other, dealing with the Palestinians must have had. See, Trump thinks that dealing with Palestinians has a lot in common with negotiating a real estate deal in New York. Now, I'm not quite sure how he makes his connection, but then again, I'm not quite sure how lunatics make their connections anyway. Uh, so, who does he send? Does he send, like, I don't know, experts? Does he send, I don't know, somebody who speaks the language? Does he do anything that's, has he ever done anything rational? Well, no. Oh, so that explains it. That's why we have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two real estate guys, negotiating peace in the Middle East. Well, and it gets funnier. I shouldn't say less, but it was just I honestly think that Iran offered the Kushner and Witkoff enough of a deal earlier that the war wasn't necessary. But those two chuckleheads did not understand nuclear technicalities, nuances enough to understand exactly what Iran was giving up. Because Iran, I think they were at least giving the impression of being reasonable going in. I mean, nobody wants to deal with the aftermath like this. And guys, I don't know about you, but there's certain things I just can't get beyond, and maybe that's a personal fault, maybe it's a personal virtue. But I can't get beyond the 175 girls killed in the bombing right after the war started with our Tomahawk missile. It might have been missiles. I mean, we know what the targets are, and of course, Trump gets confronted with this, and he says, "Well, why not Tomahawk?" What the hell can you say? And why not? Who else has these? Well, lots of people have them. Well, no, they don't. Well, I'll look into it. And you never hear that's like swept under the rug, right? And then he just ignores it and lets it just wither and die on the vine. Uh, and, I don't want to be terribly morbid or anything, but in Trump's starting to look a little like withered on the vine there. You got to admit there's even more wrong with that guy than, traditionally. And so just out of curiosity, being psychologists listening and have a thought as to how many mental disorders Trump may suffer from. We'd love to hear you. I mean, God, you'd have to do over under. Oh, wouldn't that be wild? The over under for Trump's mental defects are, I don't know, what would you say, 6, 5, 6? I think you'd have to give him more than 2 or 3. Oh, wouldn't that be funny? I'll have to check with the those Kalshi guys or the Poly Market. Oh, well, that's Donald Trump Jr. They might not. They might not want to take that bet. Uh, yeah, or you know what? You could almost do that daily. The over under for the number of criminal activities Trump will perform today. Oh, how many times Natalie Hart prints out an article? And like say, I would really wish she'd kind of let us know just on some level exactly where those articles come from, and like exactly you know who's writing them. I'd be kind of curious to see if they're, like, I don't know, reputable. Like, don't you always have to, like, consider the source? And why do we have to consider the source for information? To determine whether it is credible, to determine whether the information is worthy of being believed. And I think Trump's running kind of a deficit in that. I don't think there's anything that he says is worthy of being believed. The guy just, he lies about the time. It's just everything is just pathological. Uh, there's no doubt that, I don't know what a real sort of mental aptitude or mental, how can I put this, mental condition test exists these days. But I'm sure we've got one that we'd all love to see Trump take. I'll do a little research into that. Oh, it'd be like maybe a mental health assessment. And I think that, wouldn't that be funny? Donald Trump and a mental health assessment. What could we find out, right? Um, oh, see, and I got to tell you, there's a couple other things I want to run into just because it's getting to be Friday afternoon, and the lines are clear 949-629-3820. And in the Financial Times, on the front page, like at the top, just above the major headlines, get this: a Texas oil now this is pure genius, right? A Texas oil driller calls for lifting the ban on seal products uh, to win over Greenland. I mean, enough with Greenland. You idiot. With us in there, we're not an imperial country. We don't go, colonizing. We don't go attacking. At least we never did. And the rule was, you get to respond. You don't get to be aggressive, but you do get to respond. And I said the guy's just insane. He's got guys working on that ballroom 20 hours a day before he gets before the courts hear the case. I mean, the, so let me go back to my original premise and ask: when did cheating become like this bad? And I don't think cheating became this bad until you had Trump. To be honest with you, until you had someone that was so uncommitted to rules. And if there was ever anyone committed to thinking himself a superior being, and that everyone else is subservient. And once you get into that dominant subservient thing, that's when you get into the real racist views. And to be a true racist, you have to believe there's like two races, and one of them is dominant, and the other the subservient. And the subservient race is meant to serve the dominant race. It's just that simple. You are an inferior human being, and think about that. Wasn't that the whole Darwin thing? About going from like a chimp to a gorilla to a Cro-Magnon to whatever it is we are, Homo sapiens. Um, so yeah, and that was the theory evolved. And I think this might have been a biblical thing. Something about the sons of Ham being dark skinned and being whatever it is. So the color of skin, or let's change it. How about the pigmentation of the skin was a dominant factor in assessing your worthiness as a human being. How about that? Not unlike the South, huh? And but like I say, you've got this Texas driller who wants to eat a bunch of seal stuff from Greenland, buys a bunch of seal stuff from Greenland, so they'll like us. Guys, that boat sailed a long time ago. Uh, but also on the front page of the Financial Times, U.S. bonds slide after Besant's buyback fails to calm jitters. How's that? How'd you like to, have a bunch of American bonds and see that in the headline in London? And truth of the matter is, if you're a bond trader, you know all this is all priced in. Um, but can you believe this? I mean, on the front page of the Financial Times is Besant's failure to buy enough bonds to matter. And let's see, a country generally only buys its own bonds when people are selling 11 daylights out of them. They don't want, they don't want that kind of selling going on. They want people to keep the bonds. As it's funny. you lose either way. Yeah, you lose in the short term with what they do, or you lose in the long term through the deficit. This is no. And is that not what a rigged game kind of feels like and looks like? I sincerely hope that every red-blooded American, and we all have the same red blood, understands the Trump policy is really really simple. I'll give you Trump's economic policy in a nutshell. How about this? How about all for me and none for you? And I'll repeat that. Might have been a little difficult concept, but Trump gets it. And Trump's economic policy is, you got a pencil and piece of paper out, you may want to write this down, uh, is all for me and none for you. And that's not like Bupkis or Skidookus. And, I say Bupkis, we already know Bupkis is like nothing, and Skidookus is like 10 Bupkises. So, you really don't want to get Skidookus. So, Bupkis is bad enough. And Trump will give you, plenty of Bupkis because that's all you got left after he takes everything. Uh, I mean, this is just the whole deal is insane from the internal revenue deal to, and I say, who in the right mind thought January 6th was okay? I and they just, how do you, try? I'm from the South. I tell you this every now and then. And if there's one thing you learn in the South at a fairly early age, is you can't fix stupid. And you can put the best minds around Trump. If he don't listen, it's all for naught. And you kind of zeroed in on the problem. Uh, the know-it-all won't take advice and would rather, I love this, and would rather listen to his gut. And that's been subsisting on Diet Cokes and McDonald's cheeseburgers for, I don't know if he's 80, 60 years, 50 years, whatever it is. And I don't know. I'm not saying we've all had, like misspent youth or anything like that, but have you ever seen like a college room with a bunch of stoned out people, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and you just had like, I don't know, what do they have? DoorDash, whatever, just deliver, McDonald's and Taco Bell and all that. And then you're so stoned, you just throw the paper on the dorm room floor. Well, that's kind of like what I'm told the White House looks like in the middle of the night, like one of Trump's feeding frenzies while he's on Truth Social. And since these binge postings or truth socialings or socializing or whatever he does, uh, since they always happen in the middle of the night, don't. And then my mother was ill, and she had this thing called, was it Sundowners? Almost forgot what it was. And I'm told it's common in like dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients. And for some reason, they just start hallucinating in the middle of the night. And my mother, who'd been just, bedridden for a while, just sat up bolt upright in bed, said, "Time to go." Like, where are we going? "So we got to check out. Check out time in the motel. I'll pack the bags and you bring the car around." And I'm like, of course, I flipped out. And, it took me a while to kind of wade through that and figure out the deal. But that does bear a kind of resemblance to what Trump does. And nobody would ever testify the guy who's like of sound mind. Oh, you know what? You have to be of sound mind to make a will. In other words, you don't have to be, like a stark raving genius. It's enough to know that, you kind of have 2 kids and one's a boy and a girl. You may not even have to know the names. I leave my estate to my son and my daughter. Hopefully that's easier to take out, to determine rather. It'd be easier if it was my my son Sam L. Stein or whatever, or my daughter Beatrice Be Good. I don't know. Uh, but so, and the question is Trump competent to make a will? And keep in mind, the standards are pretty low. And I had a golden retriever, and he was really, really smart. I mean, he's never been smart as a 2 or 3 year old child, and he was more confident to make a will than Donald Trump is. Uh, Yeah, I is he confident to make him well? When you love him, no, and if he makes this big a mess in his lifetime, can you imagine what's going to be left behind? Yeah, and the sad part is Friedman's right. It's going to get worse. We have no, we're not only are we not on, we've got a guy steering the boat that's just running it onto the rocks. I mean, he's taking it, he's backing the boat up and charging the rocks at high speed to put the U.S. economy on it, on the rocks. And guys, I mean, everybody, gas starting to go up again. I started to pay over $6 a gallon for gas. And I mean, I get pollution, I get environment, and I get all that. And I truly try to drive as little as possible. I try to do everything as efficiently as I can. Uh, but and the wanton destructiveness that he brings is just a little too much. And before we go, I got to mention this is on kind of a light note. Uh, is that you guys all know about Ken Paxton, the guy that's running against James Talarico for Senate from Texas, from the great state of Texas, to replace John Cornyn. That should be like spineless John Cornyn. Um, but anyway, so it seems as though Paxton's been involved in, I don't know, a lot of legal, sometimes like white collar financial fraud kind of deals, and somehow he always manages to barely get off. Like I think the Republican Party in Texas tried to impeach him, and the vote that saved him from being impeached was his wife's vote because she was in the Senate. Okay, so there's a story about an attorney going through a security thing in a courthouse in Texas. And so the guy's got like $1,000 Mount Blanc pen, which I don't get, but he's got $1,000 Mount Blanc pen. And the guy gets to the other side, kind of gets distracted, and and walks off and leaves the pen in the little box. And so who comes up relatively shortly after that? And you know how the boxes stack up at the end of the conveyor belt. And like I say, who comes along shortly after that? But good old Kenny Quick Hands Paxton. Yeah, Kenny Quick Hands Paxton. And it seems like old Quick Hands Paxton kind of took the pen, $1,000 pen. He took it. And so later on, somebody asked about it, and supposedly he admitted to taking it and returned it. But God only knows. But yeah, quick hands, Paxton. And guys, try not to think about the fact Walmart is going through its slowest sales growth in 6 years. There's a lot to not be happy about. But again, it's how we channel that matters. And let's channel it behind a unified Democratic Party and unified Democratic votes and a commitment to not be our own worst enemy. The enemy here is not to elect the best person. I hate to say this, but the deal is here is to get rid of Trump and the other and just replace him. I mean, wouldn't you take the worst Democratic socialist over the best Republican right now? I thought you would, especially after I mentioned the Trump's responsible for 25% of the $40 trillion deficit, which is why our bonds are getting sold, which means everybody doesn't believe that we're the best country in the world, the most stable. And guess what, guys? You did it. Elections have consequences. Okay, I'm gonna quit yelling. Like I said, it's getting about that time, and my throat always kind of gives out after about an hour. And if I had a little, drinky winky, I might be able to go on, but it's getting a little scratchy, and I don't drink anymore, so it's kind of academic at this point. So, guys, it's Friday afternoon. To everyone, have a good weekend. Take care, stay well, and you know what we usually say about this time, don't you? We usually say